everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with Maryland bassist and composer J.A. Turner.
Hello, I'm J.A. Turner. Hey, Raul.
So starting from the beginning, Jay, we're very fascinated and excited to have a chance to talk to you. I've been immersed in your music over the last couple of weeks, and I definitely want to get to that. But we always like to start at the beginning. How did you get started in music and on bass?
But it started out, 12 years old, 13 years old, listening to my sister's music, which was like Motown music, because I was originally from Detroit, but we had moved to D.C. And then my older brother was bringing home Hendrix and the rock stuff. My parents were listening to classical music and big band music, the Ellington bands, Basie bands, all that stuff. So I was kind of getting hit at listening to a lot of different types of music. For some strange reason, like every kid, I wanted a guitar, and so I got a guitar. And so I'm playing on the guitar, trying to play this rock stuff, and I'm kind of like, this is all right. And one day at school, I walked by this classmate of mine, and she was playing classical guitar, and my ears just went, they just opened up, and I said, what is that? And so I just listened to her play and watched her play, and I was like, that just totally captivated me. And so I cut a lot of grass and fixed a lot of this and that, and made enough money and bought a little Yamaha G50A classical guitar, of which at that point I started taking lessons. The teacher was a flamenco guitar player, and he was really astute at bringing music and not technique necessarily. With classical guitar is like the demanding instrument for technique, but he kind of sidestepped that, and so it was all about reading and listening and just playing the music. So we worked on all the Dowland pieces, got into some of the Bach suites, the cello suites. And we were doing a lot of Hector Villalobos' music, which is just such beautiful, dissonant, modern music. And then I got a new teacher that looked at me and he goes, well, you sound great. You play all right, but with your technique or lack of technique, you'll never go much further than playing what you're playing. So we're going to start at the beginning again. Oh, wow. So started with, the hand and just basically that motion. And we did that for like 6 months. Still working on just the reading skills. That led to me auditioning for college as a classical guitar performance major. So still, bass was always kind of in the back of my mind. I'm still listening like primarily to rock music, and I'm going out to the dances, watching all my friends play rock and roll stuff when I'm playing classical music. As far as my record collection at that point, it really didn't have one. I kind of relied on my brother for that. Thanks to him. I'm glad for that. But my thing was to purchase sheet music, classical guitar sheet music, and just use that. And I would sit with that. And instead of listening to it on the record, I would just read all the time. So I went to university, got into university for my classical guitar, and this guy needed a bass player on something, and he had a bass, and I was like, well, I can do that. Technique is whatever, it makes sense. So I was introduced to bass at that point. I think I was maybe 16 years old. And at that point, about second year in college, I decided, I said, okay, I had a piece of music, Rodrigo piece, Fandangulo, and I said, I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to work it, and work with my teacher and never listen to another artist play it and see how far along I can get it. So about 3 months later, I'm like, okay, I've got this. I'm sounding pretty good. So I go down to the library and I put the record on in the library. Okay, so that sort of dates it. And Julian Bream plays this Rodrigo piece, and it was just like the writing was on the eyes. It was so beautiful and so well played. And I was like, I can't, it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm so far behind him that at that point I said, what, maybe this classical guitar thing, I don't want to be a teacher. I'll always be a teacher, but I don't want to be that to be my primary source.
Sure.
So I came home from the school and I bought a bass, and I'm starting just to play around on bass with some friends. Actually, my best friend to this day, Tim Campbell, comes in. He found me through my brother and asked me if I wanted to play bass in his band. And that's when I started playing bass in bands. I was like 17, 18 years old at that point. All original music. So I'm playing bass now. It's just about playing in original bands, and that leads to more original bands. Yeah, I just started playing a lot, with more and more bands. So I almost automatically started to freelance without even thinking about it. So it's like not playing with just, I'm in a band. No, I'm in 4 bands. I'm in 5 bands. And just learning more and more material. And again, a bulk of it was just original music. Yeah, I guess with the classical guitar, I had played enough cover music. I have read enough compositions by writers so when I broke out of that to the bass, it was all like totally opposite. All making it my own parts. That led to performing, playing more gigs, playing with more bands, and writing. I always kind of dabbled in writing. I started to experiment with more and more stuff, and I was really fortunate of always having great drummers to play with. And I think at that time there was a guy, Greg Phillips, and I were playing as a rhythm section for a lot of things. He's just a phenomenal drummer. Played at that time with a national act, a band called Starpoint. And they were charted, they were touring everywhere, and Greg was just fluent, great. Any direction you want to go, he was there. So that's where my first record kind of came out of that relationship with Greg, and we cut it for all of its 4-string bass and drums, and then we overdubbed. There was like one guitar piece on it that a friend of mine came in and played guitar, but a lot of it is just like multiple tracks of bass, stacking bass. And I always loved the idea of like, how much can I get out of the instrument?
Sure.
How many colors can I get out without pedals, and then starting to add the pedals for color and reverb. The Running from Under Pyramids record, that's how that was born. Playing in a bunch of bands, and it was my sister. She said, "You ever heard of this place called Berkeley?" And I go, "Well, yeah, kind of." And she said, "You really, you're just kind of hanging out, just not making any strides.
Yeah,
maybe you should go there and check that out." So I sent them some material and got in. I think that I'm still digesting what I learned at Berkeley.
Wow.
It was a really deep learning experience. Even though the first thing I did is when I got to Boston is I joined a hair metal band. And was off running doing that. I spent about, a year and a half there, and I got a call from a guy in Annapolis, and he had like a Caribbean band, and he's like, "Hey, our bass player, blah blah blah, he doesn't want to do this or that. This is what we can pay you." So I went to Rich Appleman and I said, "Hey, Rich, I got this gig offer, and this is what it's paying." And he said, "Man, you're good here. Get it." So, so that's what I did. I went back to Annapolis and played with that band. I guess this is when it gets fun. From that band, the guitar player was playing with this guy named Jimo Kuyate, who was a griot, a kora player, world travel performer.
Wow.
He had a group in D.C. called Mama Ya, and he was like, "We need a bass player." I'm like, "Ugh. I don't know anything about this at all." And they're like, "Go do it. You can do it." And I'm like, So, I said, "Okay, I'll go up and I'll do my best." I went to the rehearsals, and it's very special things that happened with this guy, Jimo, because he had the kora, and when the guys play the kora, it's almost like Baroque music. All the voices are encapsulated on that instrument, so he'll pull out, like the bass part or the guitar part or the rhythm part or and he's doing it all at once. And so he'll look at me and he'll go ba-da-da, ba-da-da, and I'm going ba-da-da, ba-da, and the phrasing's not quite right. And he goes ba-da-da, ba-da-da, and again, then I'd boo-da-da, boo-da-da. We'd get it right.
Yeah.
Then he would go over to the guitar player and go dan-da-da-dan, dan-da-da-dan, and the guitar player would mimic that all the way around the room. So everybody would have the parts, but you would never know, well, where's it placed within, the 1, 2, 3, 4. in the meter, and he would play it, and you go, oh, it's there.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm playing, I started my part at the end of 3, and or something like that, and he would just start the song off, and we would figure out our placement, and that's how we would learn songs with him. I worked in his band for about 15 years. We went, we did a lot of travel and a lot of good, interesting, played all sorts of places that you would never think that, or I would never thought that I could get to play, which is one of the beauties of being a musician. It's like, what? You played in this embassy, or you traveled to this place, or you played for this experience, and it's like, well, I was a bass player.
Yeah.
Needed a bass player, so I went and I was able to see things, and that's been sort of one of the beauties of playing music has been the traveling, meeting the people, the venues, and seeing how other people do things, and and gaining the respect for that, as being respectful, like in music for all types of music too. That's like, and it just, I think that really helped me as far as always inviting new ideas and listening to people, rather than going, I think I got it. It's like, no, not really.
There you go. And if I recall correctly, and kind of fast forwarding, at one point you were so involved with so many groups, you were so busy that you kind of had a turning point where you said, okay, I need to do more solo stuff now, because you had to make your own statement after being part of everybody else's for such a long time.
Yeah, just making records. Before I went to Nashville, I was working like between 200 to about 250 dates a year. Wow. just gigging, and all the time. And I was doing about a record a month for 5 years. Which is still on a scale of some, that's still not a lot, but it was, I was just hitting all the time. A situation came up where I was asked to go to Nashville to play on a record, and I was like, yeah, I'll check this out. So I went down, we recorded the record, and the producers liked the way I played, and so it kind of went on that they asked me to come back and do another record. So I went back down there, did another record, and one of the guys says, you ever think about moving down here? I said, well, sure, I'll come on down. So I moved down. I mean, also all kinds of stuff happened down there. I mean, it's interesting place. I could do everything down there that I wasn't able to do in like the DC metro area, Annapolis area. The touring, the studios were fantastic at that point. We're still using tape.
Yeah.
So the whole digital revolution hadn't, literally taken the skates off the skater kind of thing. I started working on a record down there, the Celebration Day record. And that has a bunch of solo bass pieces on it. I had bought a Stingray, a Music Man Stingray, and I didn't really dig the low B string. So I pulled that and cut a new nut and put a high C string on it to hear the upper voicings. And so that became one of like the main bass. I've never played it out. I have, to this day, I've never played it on stage. But as for an instrument for writing, it's been, just my right hand. Because I can hear the upper partials, and chords are much clearer on it. And I do write solo pieces for it, which are kind of like Baroque. I call it new Baroque music for bass. So that's fun. That's a lot of fun. For a while, I did everything in Nashville that I couldn't do here. Traveled a bunch, played behind a lot of people. I've worked with band leader for a woman, Joanna Cotton, who's the background singer, or not background, but the other singer with Air Church. Really great singer. Did tons of gigs, traveled. Whole thing with her, that was good. Met a lot of great musicians, played with a lot of great musicians. I mean, down there is just sort of like, you know who that guy played with? And it's like, really? Wow. You're in session with them and you're listening, you're going, wow, I've heard that before. Oh, well, yeah. You start talking, well, I played drums with King Crimson, or, I played with Linda Ronstadt or somebody. And it's like, and I get to sit here and play with you and learn from you. And that was a cool thing that happened down there. Plus the studio etiquette, learning to work in a studio, learning how to play a song, understanding how the role of the bass and how to perceive it and listen to a song. I think a lot of musicians, they would get so caught up in the mechanics of how to play a line or how to get in and out of the harmony, they forget to listen to the song in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
down there, that's what it is. That's all it is. So you learn how to play the actual piece of music in the song, which is an art form, and they're really, really good at it down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's the guy? My favorite bass player now is Glenn Worf. And Glenn is just, listening to his work is just like, oh my God, the space, it's just how he answers, how his parts breathe. It's just like, it's really good to learn from that type of bass player. Because, I believe that most of my work is playing for artists. I'm playing songs, and I'm not playing, lines or melody lines or, like second viola lines or anything. I'm playing a bass part it's going to help the singer do what they do.
Gotcha.
And that is, I think, it's a difficult thing, especially when you're in a time where I can play a lot, I can play fast, I can do all this stuff, but can you just make one note important?
Yeah.
I learned that from working with this guy, Demola Atapuja, who's a pedal steel guitar player. He played King Sunny Aday's band. I played on Paul Simon's first Graceland record. Okay. We were in a band for like 6 months together. And there was one tune where the deal was for the bass, just quarter notes, G, doom, 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 doom. That was it, the whole song. And I was like, nah. But every once in a while when I would hit it right, his head would turn and it would be like, there's where you need to be. And it light bulb moment, it's that simple. But if it's not where it's supposed to be and grooving, just that quarter note, then you're not going to be there very long.
Yeah.
All this stuff, all this high stuff, all this everything else is not going to matter. But it's just laying into that quarter note, playing quarters. It's like I think the greatest bass players to me are that you can always identify them by their eighth note. Just everybody's eighth note thing is different.
Yeah.
Rocco's thing is different than Jocko's thing. And you can say, oh yeah, that's so and so from their eighth notes, and that that's a pretty cool statement. That bass players, when we play like that, it's like, oh yeah, neat.
Well, and with as many people as you were playing with, again, you've got 7 albums of your own. And listening through them, it is quite a journey because I can hear the classical guitar part of your music in some, and then there's others that are so rockish that you're going, well, did I get somebody else's CD in here or what? Because it sounds like it's a totally... So there's a lot of versatility, which I'm sure also reflects from playing with so many different people, that at different stages in what you were doing, you've brought out different voices and they're different sides of yourself. And I'd ask, I know there was one I wanted to ask, I didn't know if you were playing, because it was, when I mentioned kind of the classical guitar, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if that's a piccolo bass, or are you just playing up higher register? Because I'm going, this is very guitarish, and not as bassish. I definitely was in the bass register, but the technique side, I'm going, okay, I'm picking up on something else here. Did you do all of the combination of your solo work has been a transition from Nashville to Maryland, right?
Well, the solo work, I actually started in Maryland, and that was all done on basically it's a Kubicki P bass. At that point, I was using EMGs, and that all happened. It was like the first 2 records. The first record was like a fusion-y record. The second record was more the world beat kind of record, and that was the record that I just bought the Music Man bass, and that's the one which you're talking about because that has the high C string on it.
Gotcha.
So it's going to be more range up top. And then I acquired a fretless bass, which I still have. It's like an early 70s P bass, fretless. Also EMGs. Everything was EMGs. I talked to the guy over there, and they started a relationship with EMG, and it was just, man, their stuff is just so great. It's so quiet. It's so round sounding. It doesn't like force tone out at you. It's just like there's not going to be too much treble. There's not too much low end. For when you think of an active pickup, it's like the most passive thing on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's quiet. It's just great because they're so quiet. I'm a big Eno, David Bowie fan.
Yeah.
So I think the rock stuff with that, and also like metal stuff. I like it. I like everything, but I like punk bands. One of the most fun things was when a bass player left this band around here called Judy's Fixation, and I was in a band called the Monuments, and we were like sort of a punk Motown band. And then went and played with Judy's, which is just this punk rock band, and it was just fun. So I just love anything that I guess that's like really just true, honest, good music. So so I've kind of invited in all these different worlds.
Which should bring us to your latest and your 2020 release, Passion Day.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this one in specific.
So about 8 years ago, I started playing with this drummer guy, J.P. Gaster. And we just play well together. And JP plays with a band called Clutch. We were hitting like blues pickup gigs together. And we ended up working on a record, one of my records, Art Music for Bass. And the guitar player on that, Michael Sari, also worked. He worked on that with us. And so then we did the next record and another record. So this is the culmination of the last 4 records with this particular band, which has been great because each record, it's like everybody just sees and gets a little more involved and understands what's happening in this as we build parts and work on parts. So Passion Day, usually what happens with me for the writing is something hits me and I'm taken aback by it. And this is based on a battle, World War I battle. Passchendaele, and where just so many people, countless people lost their lives. And I went into it and read more about it, and I just said, this is just so alarming. Let me put this, and it's just captivated me, and I just did more research about it, and this is what came out musically to support those emotions that I had. I would write the songs on that one. Oh, you know what I did? I bought a Fender Squier 6.
Okay.
And because in writing, I'd written a bunch of records on the 4 and the 5, and I wanted to do something different. And so I got this Fender 6. So I was really playing a lot of what escalated to become guitar parts on the Fender 6. But I wanted to do it so that a lot of the stuff on that record is the guitar and the bass are playing in tandem, but you really can't tell what's what. And I wanted to kind of have that illusion, to make that illusion. So we didn't know whether the bass was playing this part or the guitar, and we'd like go in and out. I guess it's like violin and viola parts rather than like violin and bass parts. I didn't want that separation, and so that's kind of how the guitar parts and the bass parts kind of evolved through that. Keyboard player Chris Brooks, magical. He just kind of came in and you just let him have full reign.
I think you've explained a lot, and I think it's probably a good point to kind of segue into gear, because what I'm capturing is that kind of depending what instrument you have kind of at the moment has influenced the particular album and things. And so it's part of the variety, because I totally, when you mentioned fretless, I'm going, yeah, I remember there was one of these I was hearing more fretless, and there was another one I was hearing more, driving kind of rock, and the other one I'm hearing more kind of classical guitar. Everything you've been talking has been kind of related to the gear and kind of the arsenal. So I think you're probably going to be the hardest one I've ever talked to get. How do you get your bass? Because so many people stick to like, I've got this and this is what I do, but you've got such a wide variety of colors that you're using in your painting here. But tell us about your gear. What are you playing on?
Okay, well, I guess what people will say, number one bass is it's a Kubicki. I can just show it to you here. It's a Bill Kubicki neck, and it's about a 1970s Peabody. It has Nordstrand pickups on it, which I love. Passive. I use on all the basses. The common thing is I use GHS pressure wound strings.
Okay.
40s to 95s on everything. And I just love them. They're low noise. They're easy on your fret, easy on your hands. They articulate well. Studio. They always cut. It says there's not a lot of clanking with them, and they've from record to record, from demo to demo, they've always worked great for me. You can crank up the high end a little bit, and you can get more metal out of them. Mm-hmm. Or roll back the tone, and you can I can make the thing sound like an upright, just like with left hand muting. Just like that type of stuff. That bass also has a hip shot on it.
Okay, nice.
So then there's a bunch of other basses. There's a couple jazz basses, Nordstrand pickups again. There's the fretless with EMGs. There's another P bass that I put together that has one of those Chi-Sonic pickups on it. Single coil Chi-Sonic. That thing, man, it's like a P bass on steroids. It's just the low end is just so huge, and it's like it just sits there, but it's got enough articulation on the top end to kind of cut. But the mid range is sweet and pushes through in the mix. That's a nice one. Well, there's one experimental one that has a Rick pickup in it, and I'll post that online when I'm done with it.
So some Franken bass modifications there.
But yeah, and those all came about of what do I need in the studio to change the tone up, to change color up, because I like the feel of the instrument. But I was saying, well, I need something that has a little more mid-range, a little more or a little less, or something that speaks a little differently. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of start bopping around and trying out different pickups and to attain the colors. And so they might all be jazz or P basses, but they all sound very different. Okay, so pedal board wise, I never use pedal board. Mm-hmm. It's just straight into the amp. The common denominator live and in studio for me has always been the cabinets. I'm a David Nordschau fan. Mm-hmm. And David has always provided, with his time at Eden, and just great amplifier and speaker cabinets. Now his DNA stuff is just like, it's beautiful, man. It's total, all the frequencies are there. It's light. They're loud if you need them to be, but they're also they're just so they're balanced. You don't have to really do anything. I mean, it sounds like your hands. That's the thing I like about his cabinets. I have a couple of the single 12 cabinets. Okay. So I have one of his 15 cabinets, and the 15 is just like the 12 with a big stick of butter on it. It's really good. I use that with a 1350 DNA head. Okay. And the DI on that head is something to be reckoned with. Again, with this stuff, you don't have to mess around with it. It's just like, well, generally the only thing that gets turned up is the volume and the master volume. And it's mainly, I usually run all my front ends pretty hot and then back off with my hands. And then if I need more volume, if it has a master volume, then I'll use that for just more sound. Yeah, the 1350 with those 212s, if there's a thing I do where I play a note like a G on the third, and then I'll pluck the note on the 15th fret, and if you do that, you get the actual tone of the note. So it sounds like you're playing an octave below.
Gotcha.
And that particular setup handles that easily. It's because it has enough headroom to do that.
Sure.
Headroom, you're not going to produce that fundamental.
Gotcha. Well, and what I notice I've got the 800, and even though you can EQ, I tend to have everything running just straight up because I don't really need to goof around with the way the sound is coming through. I like what's...
Hit the on switch, you're there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's great that he has it there, but I almost feel it's like my cell phone. I just use it to make phone calls. I don't use much of the other stuff with it. So... carrying on through the sound chain, do you have a preference in instrument cables? Because you've got your basses, you've got your GHS strings.
You know what happened with the instrument cables? Yes. I have a buddy that he does tech work for a couple of really great guitar players. And when he comes off the road, he's made me cables. And it's basically a Megami type cable. Okay. But he makes and solders everything up. And so that's where I get my cables from. I like them with silent ends. So if I'm in a situation where I need to unplug my bass, the front of house guy doesn't get pissed off at me. It's like, okay, it's dead, good.
Yeah.
Monitor the guys and like, why'd you do that? I like sound-wise. I love again for studio gear in Nashville. Usually, bass players, one of the things most bass players would have down there would be a preamp and a compressor. And so what I evolved into down there was a Calrec mic pre, Brent Averill package. So it's mic pre, a Calrec 1066 mic pre EQ. It just sounds great. And I did that over a Neve because it didn't have the low mid bump like a Neve has, and it also had an insert point in it for compressor. Compressors, I just kind of went from compressor to compressor to compressor, and I didn't really. My favorite is something that I probably can't afford now. So, I tear up. But I use a BSS compressor now,
Okay.
and it's actually pretty nice. Then the other thing that I like is I have a tube channel by a company called Giraffe, Gyraf. Good friend Tim Campbell who does Tim Campbell microphones. He turned me on to it and got this unit to me, and it's basically like having an API front end with a pull tut and an LA2A all in one box, and it's all tube, and it's a beautiful channel. Those are the required things for sound. So we have one of the amps, the basses, that outboard gear, pedal boards for me. Okay, this is in answer to your question. The pedal board thing happens every record. I basically take every pedal off, and as I build the song, I go, what do I want to introduce color-wise to this, and then I'll grab this pedal, or I go try this one out, start listening. And so the pedal boards will evolve, and they'll be completely different for every project.
Gotcha.
And that, every once in a while, I'll bring something to a session, but I usually, I just let hands do it and just great bass tone. I think that's the primary thing. And if you don't have good bass tone, then it's like a pedal's not going to help you.
Yeah.
It's in a lot of situations, especially live situations, when you invite pedals into your sound, your sound actually dissipates. It actually goes the other way. You're thinking, well, this is going to enhance my sound, but you hit that buzz pedal and it's like, boom, everything's gone. It sounds great by itself. It's like a good bass.
Yeah.
It sounds great by itself, but what does it really sound like in a mix? That's when the judgment comes with an instrument or a sound. There's a guy around here who's building pedals. I've got 3 or 4 of his pedals down and just love his stuff. I use an MXR, their bass compressor.
Okay.
It's modeled after an 1176, and it is really a great box. So that's first in the chain on the pedal board. I use a JHS spring reverb for some stuff. Pictronics Tremolope, which is the coolest friggin' tremolo pedal ever, because you'll hit a note, and depending on how hard you hit it, it'll initiate the tremolo. So it'll start as the note gets quieter, it'll either get faster or slower depending on how you have it set up. So this guy Paul Mercer that builds pedals, his fuzz pedal, he has a clone of a CE2 Boss Chorus that is just like scary good. Something else he calls a Klein pedal, which I couldn't even begin to. That's the best description I could give you.
Gotcha.
And the other thing I do for studio and live, everything is always geared towards what does the artist sound like? What are their needs from a bass player?
Sure.
Do I need to come in there with like a super hi-fi sound, or do I need to come in there with just some other any other type of sound that will make the sound help to complete the sound of the band? Because that's the only important thing. As a bass player, it's like my job is to provide that part of it. And again, artist song that's up here, and then everything that supports that's what's important. Because outside of my records, 100% of my work is doing that. So I also I'm a big fan of an Ampeg B25 68. It's been outfitted with a couple of KT88s, a 71 V4B Ampeg, that has been rebuilt to stock that I love. Trainer Super Custom Special that has this aquatic KT88 that'll make any bass sound like God. It is incredible. Lots of power. It's a 240 watt head. I call it my SVT eater.
Yeah.
It sounds better. It's and my workhorse, it's a Rivera build. From what I understand, Rivera worked at Fender in the 80s, and he designed a couple of amps. One of the amps is this Bassman 135. It's a quad of 6L6 tubes with power section, and it's a phenomenal. It just sounds great. It puts out 120 watts clean tube. Mm-hmm. We're not talking Class D. It's not that. It weighs what it does, and so that's kind of what I go in with the DNA. It does everything good. And the other thing I like about DNA is like if you're on a large stage or something, it's going to cut. It's going to have enough juice to put out there, whereas the tube heads are just going to really start coughing blood after you turn them up to a certain point. So for club work and studio work, the tube heads seem to are a little bit better. But anything that's like outside, larger, it's like the DNA goes in the car. And the other thing is, as far as fuzz, I call my amp pegs my 80 pound fuzz tones. So if you want to get a fuzz tone, something to sound like, well, that guy had a great sound, man, it was so fuzzy. It's like, well, you need to invest in the 80 pound fuzz tone, because generally you're not going to get it. It's just not going to sound, it's not going to be three-dimensional. There's lots that, are coming close and getting better, but...
Well, and it's interesting because there is a lot of nuances that come with amplifiers, and I'll say especially as electric bass is relatively a new instrument compared to the gamma of the strings and, the violins, the violas, the uprights, all this stuff. Those are hundreds of years old. We all know the electric bass is a lot, newer and younger. And as the instrument was evolving, also the amplification was evolving. And as you've had these pioneers and people tweaking and, like the David Northshell looking at something and going, if I do this, then this is going to do this. And a musician getting it in their hands and incorporating it. And we recently had somebody sent us a question about the amplifiers that the bassist for Grand Funk Railroad was using, because it was a specific sound they were looking for. And it's a brand that's no longer fabricated, but all of the sound was coming specifically from that amp. And it had a knob inside that you'd get back behind it, and you turn that, and it would give you distortion. And so it was all kind of built in, no pedal, just the amp. And that was it. That was what the music was asking for. And that was the Grand Funk Railroad sound.
Yeah, man.
And that was all there was to it. So anyway, obviously we could talk gear forever, but let's look ahead. What plans do you have for the future? What projects are you going to be working on?
Well, we're actually going in the studio in 2 weeks to work up 3 new songs with the same people, Michael Sari and JP Gaster. And those are pretty straight ahead, like rock sounding songs.
Okay.
For that trio, and there'll be a vocalist with that. So there's that. I've also been working on my pet project. I'm working on 5 songs for soprano and bass, sort of, I guess classical, because the soprano woman, Melissa Wimbish, and she's just, world class, just beautiful. She sings on a Song Cycle record of mine, and on art music for bass. She does the Peter Gabriel song on that. And so it's just soprano and bass, and sort of in a classical type frame, short songs. So there's that, and session work's coming in. I mean, it's just, there's talk. This is the fun thing, is there's talk of an organ trio. And there's the guy plays B3, and he's just got that Philly kind of sound thing happening.
Yeah.
And he just sent me a list of tunes and said, "Yeah, start listening to these." And So I'm really excited about that. So it'll just organ, bass, and drums. That should be fun. That, maybe an ambient record coming up. I'm starting the gears are spinning with that. So that'll be a throwback to the second record, the circling record. It's like once something is done, it's like all of a sudden, okay, I'm finished with that, and it just opens up, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what's intriguing me, and it's so. Just always writing when I have time. And now that, I think the earlier question was about, that I'm not working with as many people now. And I did that on purpose because most of my career, I've played other people's music or done, so many gigs that I hardly have any time to do anything for myself. And I just wanted to flip it around for a little while and just compose and write. And it's like, spend a little time with my bassist and see what else I can get out of them.
Gotcha. Well, and you're so busy with so many things. If people want to stay on top or know what it is that you're doing, jaturner.net.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully that will be up to date. It is right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, of course, the Facebook page, just looking around for J.A. Turner, J-A-Y. My first name, A initial Turner, Turner. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram also, which is, J-A-Y Turner _music. And so those places, we'll usually have some photos or something happening. I'm trying to be a little bit better about posting in current posting, to keep up with that.
There's a lot to keep track of, man. Jay, we appreciate you taking your time out of such a busy schedule to share such a wide, versatile collection of music and your story. Folks, make sure you stay on top of what Jay's doing. You've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine.